He told me he wasted his life on me. Those words weren't screamed or shouted. They were whispered, like poison dripping from the tongue of a man who once promised to love me forever. Then he found the truth I buried in my diary, and everything fell apart. It happened on a Tuesday. Funny how life never warns you before it explodes. The morning started like any other. I made his coffee, 2 sugars, no cream. He barely looked at me as he took the cup. He had that look again, the kind that silently said, "You're the reason I'm not who I thought I'd be." 25 years of marriage. 2 kids. A house in the Chicago suburbs with a porch swing I never sat on. And a silence between us that had grown so thick, even the walls started keeping secrets. I was folding laundry when I heard the drawer slam upstairs. His footsteps were heavier than usual. I knew that sound. It wasn't rage. It was worse, it was discovery. I climbed the stairs slowly, almost calmly. A strange chill had settled over me, as if my body knew what was coming before my mind did. He stood in the bedroom, holding the worn, leather-bound journal in his hand. My diary. The one I hid under the cedar chest, behind old photos and forgotten scarves. The one I started writing the year I realized he'd stopped seeing me. "I thought you were smarter than this," he said without looking at me. "Writing it all down?" I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. He flipped it open, eyes skimming words I never meant for him to read. Confessions of my loneliness, the quiet resentment. The one night, that night I wrote about in late 2017. He looked up. "So it's true. You slept with him." Silence. "Tell me I'm wrong, Camille." But he wasn't. And I didn't lie. "It was one time," I said softly. "And it was after you forgot our 20th anniversary. After you told me I was just background noise." His eyes narrowed. "You cheated. You betrayed me. I gave you my best years." That's when he said it. "I wasted my life on you." I don't know what broke more in that moment, his heart or mine. But here's what he didn't understand. I had wasted mine too. Not because of the affair, but because I spent years begging for his attention without using my voice. I lost myself in his ambition, his image, his control. I was the perfect wife on paper. And completely invisible in my own home. I watched him storm out of the room, diary still in hand. He didn't ask about the pain behind those pages. He didn't ask why. He only cared about the betrayal, not the years of emotional starvation that led to it. The diary was my only voice. I wrote in it late at night, when he'd fall asleep with his back turned. I wrote when I found lipstick that wasn't mine on his collar 3 years ago. I wrote when he mocked my weight after my second pregnancy. I wrote when I started Googling how to feel alive again. The truth was I didn't cheat because I fell in love with someone else. I cheated because I needed to remember what it felt like to be touched like I mattered. The man, Marcus, wasn't even someone I planned to see again. He was kind, present, and nothing like Michael. But the guilt swallowed me whole, and I ended it after one night. I never wrote Marcus again. Never called. Never even told him how empty I felt after. But that moment, that mistake, became the only part of the story Michael cared about. That night, he didn't come home. By morning, my son, Caleb, called to say his dad was staying at a hotel. My daughter, Lila, who was studying in New York, started texting frantically. "Mom, what happened?" Dad posted something weird on Facebook. I opened the app. Michael had shared a picture of our wedding day with a caption that read, "Funny how the woman you loved the most becomes the one who breaks you." The comments came quickly. "Stay strong, bro. She doesn't deserve you." Another good man used and discarded. No one asked what I had been through. No one cared about the years I tried. And yet, I didn't feel the shame I expected. I felt relief, because the truth was finally out. It was messy, painful, and far from ideal. But it was mine. And I wasn't going to apologize for surviving a loveless marriage that demanded my silence in exchange for stability. That day, I did something I hadn't done in years. I dressed up, red blouse, black jeans, a touch of lipstick. I walked out of the house not as Michael's wife, not as someone's mother, just Camille. I drove to the lakefront, sat on a bench near Navy Pier, and opened a new notebook. I titled the first page, Letters to Myself. And I wrote, "You are not what he called you. You are not a mistake. You are a woman who stayed too long, loved too hard, and forgot to breathe for herself. But you're here now, and that's enough." He thought finding my diary would break me, but it became the fire I needed to rise. What came after would shake the foundation of our family. Secrets that didn't belong to only me would come crawling out of the shadows, especially the one I never thought I'd have to speak out loud. The truth about Lila's birth. The lie I kept buried for 22 years. And Michael wasn't the only one about to unravel. I never meant to lie about Lila. But some truths are so heavy, you hide them where no one dares to look, not even yourself. After Michael found my diary and left, the silence that followed was almost liberating. Terrifying, too. I had been so accustomed to his presence, even if that presence was more like a shadow than a light. The house suddenly felt like a stranger's. Every photo frame on the wall stared back at me like a silent judge, especially the one from Lila's 6th birthday, her gap-toothed smile glowing, Michael's arm draped over her tiny shoulders, and me, standing slightly behind, as always. But what they didn't know, what he never knew, was that Lila didn't share his blood. I had buried that truth beneath layers of routine, family dinners, and report cards. And now, with my diary cracked open and my marriage unraveling thread by thread, it loomed above me like a thundercloud ready to burst. 2 days passed without a single word from Michael. Not a call, not a knock, just absence. Caleb came by once, concern all over his face, but I lied to him too. "Dad, and I just need space," I said. "It's nothing you need to worry about." He didn't believe me, not fully. He had his father's eyes, skeptical, probing. But he hugged me anyway and said, "I love you, Mom." Before driving off in that beat-up Toyota, he swore he'd trade in but never did. The next evening, just as the sun dipped behind the skyline, Lila came home. I wasn't expecting her. She had midterms. But there she was, standing in the kitchen doorway, red curls tied up, duffel bag slung over her shoulder, a storm in her eyes. "Why did Dad post that crap online?" she demanded. "I don't know," I replied, keeping my tone even. "You should probably ask him. You know I tried. He won't pick up. Caleb won't tell me anything either." "Mom," she stepped closer. "Did something happen? Between you and Dad?" I looked at her then, not as a mother looks at a child, but as a woman looks at the consequences of her silence. "It's complicated," I whispered. "No," she snapped. "It's not. You're my mother. And my whole life is falling apart without anyone telling me the truth." I wanted to hold her, to pull her in and bury my face in her shoulder the way I used to when she was 5. But she was 22 now, a woman, and I couldn't lie to her the way I used to about Santa Claus or why we had to leave Christmas dinner early at her grandparents' that year. So I sat her down, and for the first time I told her, "Lila, the truth is, Michael isn't your biological father." The silence that followed felt like being buried alive. Her mouth parted, but no sound came out. She blinked twice, then stared at the floor as if the tiles might rearrange themselves into a new, safer reality. "What are you saying?" she finally asked. I took a breath, one that felt like breathing in broken glass. "I met someone when your father and I were first married. It was early on, maybe 2 years in. Things were already strained. He was always working, barely came home. I was lonely, lost. This man, his name was Ethan, was kind. He listened. And for one stupid, desperate night, I broke my vows." I paused. When I found out I was pregnant, I thought it was Michael's. He was thrilled, called it a miracle, and I didn't correct him. Lila stood abruptly, the chair screeching back. Her hands trembled. "So, my whole life, I've been living a lie?" "No," I said firmly, rising to meet her gaze. "Your life is real. Your memories are real. Michael raised you. He fed you, tucked you in, taught you how to ride a bike. He is your father in every way that counts. I didn't tell him because I thought it would destroy everything. I thought I was protecting you. But you weren't, she choked out. You were protecting yourself. She was right. I said nothing as she walked past me, grabbed her bag, and slammed the door. Later that night, Michael came home. Not to reconcile. Not to talk. He came to confront. He looked tired. Worn. As if the weight of 2 decades had finally crushed the image of the life he thought he had. She told me, he said simply, standing in the living room with his arms folded. I didn't ask who. I knew it was Lila. Did you ever plan to tell me? He asked. I plan to take it to my grave. I replied honestly. He nodded slowly. And here I thought your affair in 2017 was the worst of it. It was one night, I said, but you had years of affairs I pretended not to see. Do you want to compare betrayals, Michael? Because I have pages. That's different, he spat. No, it's not. He exhaled sharply. You know what's funny? I used to think you were weak. Passive. Always letting things slide, smiling through things you hated. I didn't realize that silence was just another kind of weapon. I didn't flinch. I raised that girl, he said. I wiped her tears. I paid for her ballet. I sat through hours of recitals just to see her wave at me. And all along, I was just a prop in your secret show. You were more than that, I said quietly. You are her father. Nothing changes that. He shook his head. Everything changes that. He walked out again. And this time, he took nothing with him. Days passed. Lila stopped returning my calls. Caleb remained distant. The house was quieter than ever. But something had shifted in me. It was strange. Losing everything had made me lighter. One morning, I sat in the dining room with my diary. I flipped back through the years. Tears dotted the pages, laughter etched between heartbreaks. It was all there, the woman I was, the woman I pretended to be, and the woman I was becoming. I wrote a letter. Not in the diary. On real paper. For Lila. My dearest girl, I understand if you never speak to me again. I made choices I thought were right at the time, but love without truth is a lie no matter how well it's packaged. I want you to know that everything I did, even in my brokenness, was because I loved you. You were never a mistake. You were my light, even in my darkest hours. And if you ever want to meet Ethan, I can find him. Or not. It's your choice. Just know that your story doesn't start or end with me. It's yours to tell now. Love, Mom. I left the letter on her bed, hoping one day she'd return for it. What I didn't expect was who came to the door next. Ethan. Yes, that Ethan. And the moment I saw him, standing on my porch in a gray coat with years written into his smile, I knew. Michael had gone digging, and he had found the one man who could destroy what little was left of the life I once knew. When I opened the door and saw Ethan standing there, time stopped. Not in a romantic way, but in the way you feel when your past catches up to your present with no warning. He hadn't changed much. A little grayer at the temples. Deeper lines around his eyes. But that same softness lived in his expression, the one that once made me feel seen in ways Michael never could. Camille, he said. Just my name. But it carried 22 years of silence. I stepped back, my hand still on the door, body frozen with questions. How did you find me? He looked uncomfortable, shifting on his feet. Your husband, Michael, he reached out. Said it was urgent. Said I needed to know the truth. I blinked. And you came? His gaze was steady. I never stopped wondering. I let him in. Not because I was ready, but because I had no strength left to run. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd once packed Lila's lunch, where Michael had once kissed my hand on a rainy Tuesday, back when we still believed in each other. Ethan folded his hands on the table, carefully. He said she might be my daughter. She is, I said quietly. He inhaled sharply, eyes glistening. Why didn't you tell me? I looked down at my hands. Because you were married. You had your life. And I had just salvaged mine. Michael had finally started coming home again. He wanted a family, and I thought, maybe if I gave him that, we could find our way back. And what about me? He asked, his voice cracking. I spent 2 decades wondering why you disappeared. One day you were in my life, and the next gone. Tears prickled behind my eyes. Because I knew if I told you, everything would fall apart. And I wasn't ready for that. He leaned back, eyes fixed on me. Well, it's all falling apart now, Camille. I nodded. I know. A long silence settled between us. Then he pulled something from his coat pocket, a photo. A recent one. Lila, from one of her public social media pages. She was smiling, holding a camera in one hand, her hair pulled into a messy bun. She looks like me, he said with a small, aching smile. But she has your fire. I didn't correct him, didn't tell him how lately that fire had become smoke and ash between us. I wrote her a letter, I said, voice trembling. But she won't answer my calls. He placed the photo gently on the table. Do you want me to meet her? I looked up. I don't know. Maybe. Maybe not yet. But the truth was, that choice wasn't mine anymore. That same night, I got a call from Caleb. Mom, he said slowly. Did you tell Lila? I closed my eyes. Yes. Well, she's not okay. She just called me crying from a bus stop in the middle of nowhere. Said she needed space. Said her whole life was a lie. I sat up straighter. Where is she? I don't know. She won't tell me. Panic surged through me. I had taken everything from her, her sense of security, identity, even her trust. She was out there alone, unraveling a story she didn't ask to be part of. I called and texted. No answer. I waited the entire night by the front door, hoping to hear her keys in the lock. But nothing. When morning came, I drove. I checked every spot she used to go when she was overwhelmed, the library near Millstone Park, the hill behind Lincoln High, even the little French cafe downtown where she liked to study. Nothing. Then I remembered the beach. There was a small, quiet stretch along Lake Michigan where she and I used to go when the world felt too loud. I drove there with shaking hands and prayers knotted in my throat. And there she was, sitting cross-legged in the sand, shoes off, hair whipping in the wind. Her face was pale, eyes swollen from crying. I walked slowly, not wanting to startle her. She didn't look up as I sat beside her. For a long time, we just listened to the waves crash. I didn't run away, she said finally. I just needed to breathe. I understand, I replied. She turned to face me, her voice barely a whisper. Is he really my father? Ethan? I nodded. Yes. She looked out at the horizon again. So who am I then? Just some product of a mistake. No, I said sharply, grabbing her hand. You are the best thing I ever did. You were never a mistake. You were a gift, a reminder that I was still capable of loving deeply, even when I was drowning. Her lips quivered. Why didn't you tell me? Because I thought you needed the image of a perfect family more than the truth. I was wrong. She nodded slowly, tears slipping down her cheek. I'm angry, but I still love you. My chest cracked open at those words. I love you too, Lila. So much. And if you want to meet him, Ethan, I'll support that. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. But she leaned into my shoulder, and for now, that was enough. 3 days later, she met Ethan. We arranged it quietly, no drama, no pressure. Just a father seeing his daughter for the first time in a new light. They met at the same cafe she used to study at. I watched from across the street, heart pounding like a teenager on prom night. He walked in slowly. She stood. They hugged. And in that moment, something inside me healed. Later that evening, she came home and said, he's kind. Different than I expected. But I liked him. I smiled. He liked you too. But just as the dust began to settle, Michael returned. He didn't knock. Just opened the door with the key I hadn't had the heart to cancel. He looked around the house like it belonged to a stranger now. I want to talk, he said. I stood still, hands clasped in front of me. I filed the papers, he continued. Divorce. You'll get the notice soon. I nodded. I expected that. He hesitated. But I need to say something first. I raised an eyebrow. I was never perfect, he said. I know that. I cheated. I belittled. I made you feel small. And when I found that diary, it broke me, but not because you cheated. Because I realized how long you'd been silent. He took a breath. I think I always knew Lila wasn't mine. There were whispers in my gut. But I loved her anyway. Still do. She's my daughter, no matter what DNA says. My throat tightened. Thank you for saying that. He nodded slowly. You deserve better. And I'm sorry it took losing you to realize I was never enough for you. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was closure.
And that was enough.
Weeks passed. The house began to feel new again. Lighter. Warmer. Lila started calling Ethan Dad. Slowly, cautiously. Caleb warmed up to the truth, too, telling me one night, honestly, Mom, I always thought something felt off. But I respect how you handled it. One morning, as I stood watering my plants, Lila handed me a small package. What's this? I asked. A new journal, she said. You wrote your truth in the last one. Maybe this time, you can write your dreams. Inside the front page, she'd written, for the woman who gave too much, found herself again, and still had love to give. And for the first time in years, I smiled without guilt. 2 months after Michael served the divorce papers, I thought the storm had passed. Lila had started therapy and was slowly beginning to rebuild her identity, this time on her terms. She called Ethan every few days, slowly peeling back years of distance neither of them could control. Caleb visited more often, watching me carefully, as if seeing me in a new light. For the first time in decades, I wasn't just someone's wife or someone's mother. I was Camille, a woman rediscovering the sound of her own voice. Then Michael called. Not a text, not an email, a real call. And when I picked up, his voice was different. Camille, he said softly, can we meet? Please. One last time. I hesitated. Michael, what else is there to say? I need to give you something, he said. And you need to hear something. It won't take long. The tone in his voice unsettled me. It wasn't anger or blame. It was something quieter.
Sadder.
We agreed to meet at Palmer Park, the same place he'd proposed 27 years ago, beneath the old oak tree near the bridge. He was already sitting on the bench when I arrived, thinner than I remembered, his usually sharp features dimmed by fatigue. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said without looking at me. I wasn't sure either, I admitted. He pulled a small envelope from his coat pocket and handed it to me. My name was written on the front in his careful, deliberate handwriting. What is this? I asked. Read it later, he replied. First, I need to tell you something. I sat beside him, bracing myself. I went to the doctor last week, he began, his voice low. After I collapsed at the office. Thought it was just stress or maybe a flu. I turned to him, a knot forming in my gut. It's stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The words hit me like a slap. I stared at him, blinking, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. Michael, I'm not telling you for pity, he interrupted quickly. I don't want your sympathy. I need to get some things off my chest. Before it's too late. My heart sank. We had spent years hurting each other, building walls and hiding behind pride. And now, time was cheating us of healing. I was awful to you, he said, his voice cracking. You don't have to agree. I know what I did. I cheated because I was angry. Not at you, at myself. I hated the man I had become, and instead of fixing that, I blamed you. You were always there, always forgiving, always holding the damn house together while I drowned in my own failure. I swallowed hard, tears stinging my eyes. And then when I found your diary, he continued, I thought it confirmed everything, that I'd been made a fool. But really, it showed me who you really were, a woman I never took the time to know. He paused, his eyes glassy. The affair wasn't what broke me, Camille. What broke me was reading about the nights you cried alone while I slept next to you. That killed me more than anything. I didn't speak. Couldn't. You deserved better, he whispered. And I knew it. But I didn't know how to say that until now. The air between us hung heavy. I reached for his hand without thinking, and he didn't pull away.
I'm sorry, Michael, I said.
For the pain, for the secrets, for staying when we should have let go. He nodded.
Yeah.
Me too. We sat there for a long while, watching the wind rustle the trees and the sky turn gold above the lake. Before we parted, he looked at me once more. Take care of her, he said. Lila. She may never call me Dad again, but I'll die knowing I loved her the best way I could. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. Then he stood, gave me one final smile, and walked away slowly, disappearing around the bend. That night, I opened the envelope he had given me. Inside was a letter. Camille. If you're reading this, then I probably couldn't say everything I wanted face to face. You are the mother of my children, the keeper of our home, and the woman I never truly appreciated. That's on me. I hated you for writing those things in your diary, but deep down, I hated myself more for giving you a reason to write them. And now, with whatever time I have left, I want you to know that I forgive you. Not because I'm better, but because I hope in the end, we can both be free. Love or not, we mattered. We built something real. And I'll always be grateful for that. Michael. I folded the letter, tears blurring the ink. For the first time since everything shattered, I felt something close to peace. Not because it all ended perfectly, but because it was honest. 3 weeks later, Michael passed away in his sleep. The funeral was small.
Quiet.
Caleb delivered the eulogy. Lila came. She stood at the back, her eyes fixed on the casket but never shedding a tear. Afterward, she whispered to me, he did what he could. That's enough for me. We buried more than just a man that day. We buried secrets, regrets, and the version of ourselves we had clung to for far too long. In the months that followed, I filled the journal Lila gave me with stories, not about pain, but about dreams. Things I wanted to do, places I'd never been, music I never let myself dance to. One evening, I stood in front of a mirror, wearing a red dress I once bought but never wore because Michael didn't like loud colors. And I danced. Alone.
Free.
And for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting to be loved. I was loving myself. After Michael's death, the house felt different. Quieter, yet somehow fuller. The walls no longer echoed with the weight of unspoken words. Instead, they held space for healing. Lila came home more often now, her visits growing from tentative to warm. She had started calling Ethan Dad without hesitation, embracing the family we had rebuilt from the pieces. Caleb seemed more relaxed too, less guarded when he hugged me and shared his thoughts. One afternoon, I found myself sitting on the porch swing, the one Michael and I had bought together but never really used. The sun was setting, casting golden light across the yard. I had a fresh journal in my lap, its pages blank and promising. I opened it and wrote the words that had finally settled in my heart. I am more than my mistakes. More than the silence I once kept. I am a woman who survived betrayal, loss, and loneliness, and chose to rise. It wasn't easy. Some days, the shadows of the past still whispered. But I learned to listen differently, to speak my truth without fear, to hold my head high when the world tried to remind me of who I once was. Lila joined me on the porch, holding 2 mugs of tea. Mom, she said, sitting beside me, thank you for being brave, for telling me the truth. I needed that. I smiled, my heart swelling. Thank you for forgiving me. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky darken and the stars appear one by one. That night, as I closed my journal, I realized something profound. My story wasn't about the man who told me he wasted his life on me. It wasn't about the lies or the secrets. It was about reclaiming my voice when it felt lost, finding strength in my scars, and choosing love, especially for myself. The woman I finally became was not perfect, but she was whole, and she was free. What part of Camille's journey resonated with you the most? Have you ever faced a moment where your truth changed everything? Share your thoughts below. Let's talk about healing, strength, and the power of speaking our stories.